Ask the Biologist with Dr. Sean Landsman. Just one of my highlights on this program. I can get a little bit sentimental. It's the last week. All my dreams came true. Everybody that I wanted to talk on this show came here and presented this idea to Sean about Ask the Biologist early. And wow, so much great response, so much fun, and so much personal learning. Through Sean and Ask the Biologist. So let's get him out here so he can give us another musky lesson. Hey, Sean, wow, you're looking like a new dad that got a little bit of sleep this week.
I did. She's actually blessed us with, let's see, last night was 3 or 4 hours straight. The night before was 4 hours straight. Like we're able to piece together a full night's sleep. So we're very fortunate. We're doing really well. Maggie's doing great. As a new father, I couldn't ask for anything more.
Wow. So, fantastic. Yeah. Congratulations. And
thanks.
Good on that sleep thing. Teach us.
So before I teach, if anyone out there has a newborn or a toddler looking for something to read their kids, Hedrick, because he has a little grandson, Hedrick Wachelka, one of our previous guests, who always gets fishing related and musky related books. He wanted this for Christmas, and his daughter sent him that book, among others. But when he told me about that book, I had to buy it immediately. So knowing that we were having one of our own. So also want to give a shout out to my Grammy Ree. My grandma is watching. Hi, Grammy Ree. She's hanging out with my parents at home. And of course, John, when you said Big Mama topwater baits, that's one of my favorites right there. That got some fish last year, including some early season fish. I got a cannonball on the way. I got a Lake X Lures cannonball on the way, and I'm really eager to try that out. But I'm a big topwater junkie. So
me too. Most fun you can have catching muskies right there.
You got it. So all right, we can go ahead and get into this. Lisa, if you want to flip over to my screen here. There we go. All right. Before we actually get into it, right before I logged on to StreamYard, I saw on Twitter a master's student at Bemidji State, Camden Glade. He had posted this picture. He's doing a diet study on muskies in Minnesota. And that's a 13-inch bullhead in the mouth of a 40-inch muskie. In like 2 years, almost to the day or maybe to the day, they got another muskie like 2 years ago, also with a bullhead in its mouth, about 43 inches long was that muskie. But a 13-inch bullhead and a 40-inch muskie, that's over 30% of the fish's body length. And so this is a freshly coughed up muskie. So when they got it in the net, it coughed it up. So it was like super fresh. You can tell by the coloration on the bullhead that it hardly looks decomposed at all. So anyway, I thought that was cool. Figured folks would be interested in this. All right, so we're going to talk about some kind of, I guess, sort of random topics as water temperatures warm. I didn't really know what else to call today's Ask the Biologist segment. But a couple of things come to mind when I think about warming water temperatures and springtime in general. One of them is lymphosarcoma and just the prevalence of disease that we sometimes see around this time of year. And then just changes in the fish's behavior as we proceed with the warming water temperatures through spring as we get into the summer peak. So John had texted me earlier today and asked me a question about thermal refugia or thermal refuges. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute too. But lymphosarcoma is one of these weird diseases that can often affect esophagids like pike and muskies. That picture there on the top right, I actually pulled that off of Ottawa's 613 Fishing, their Facebook group. Someone had posted this recently of a pike they caught in the area. And there were some pretty funny comments likening it to meatballs and other nastiness. Cauliflower, I think, was one of the things they had mentioned. But anyway, it reminded me that at this time of year, we may start to see more fish, especially pike and muskies, with these sarcomas on them, these tumors. So lymphosarcoma is caused by a virus. It's actually a type of retrovirus. For those that want maybe something similarly found in humans, it would be the HIV is a type of retrovirus. It's found naturally in waterways, and lymphosarcoma itself is characterized by malignant tumors. So this virus is thought to cause a cancer within the fish, and then these tumors are kind of the outward signs of the virus in the body, and so they're just basically cancerous growths. There's some confusion sometimes about how lymphosarcoma actually gets transmitted in waterways. It's often transmitted through what's called horizontal transmission. So that is like contact from fish touching each other, particularly during the spawning season, as opposed to vertical transmission, which would be something that gets deposited through the eggs or milt as it goes vertically in the water column down to the bottom, gets into the waterway that way. In this case, this virus is occurring naturally. The fish have the virus in their bodies. There's usually as the water temperatures start to fall in the autumn or winter, you start to see those tumors begin growing again. And then when those fish come together in the spring to spawn, they touch each other and pass the virus off during the spawning season. Eventually, those tumors can actually kind of slough off or regress. So during the summer, fish that may have had those tumors in the spring might not have like those big growths like you see on that pike there in the summer. You might see maybe a scar, but then they'll come back usually like in the next spring. Now, one of the things that anglers will sometimes ask me, I got an email from someone recently about this, and on that 613 fishing page, people are like, what can we do? There's not really anything that you can do. It's natural. It's a naturally occurring virus in the water. There's really not much you can do. Once it's in a system, it's kind of there and it's there to stay. People were asking, well, can we just sacrifice those fish and just dispose of them? You can't do that. First of all, it's kind of unethical to harvest a fish, even if it's of legal size, and then not use it, just throw it in the trash, for example. So your best bet is to really just leave it. It will either die naturally on its own, or it can survive for some period of time, just like humans can live with cancers for some period of time. And those fish may still be able to spawn successfully, and just because they may come in contact with another fish during the spawning season doesn't necessarily mean that other fish is going to get the virus. Okay, so I would just say, unfortunately, just let the fish go and hope for the best. The other kind of disease that we see flare up sometimes in the spring. There hasn't been a really big outbreak of it, to my knowledge, in recent memory, but VHS, or viral hemorrhagic septicemia virus. And of course, many of you know already or have heard about VHS, particularly as it relates to the St. Lawrence River muskie population that took a really big hit kind of around 2007, 2008, maybe between 2005 to 2008. It was the virus was first discovered in the Great Lakes in 2005 and in muskies in 2005. Actually, in muskies, it was from a fish that was collected in 2003, but that the virus wasn't actually identified until 2005. VHS has like a global distribution as a virus, and there's tons of different strains out there. It occurs in the marine environment, occurs in the freshwater environment, occurs all over the place. The Great Lakes actually has its own strain that seems to have adapted to the Great Lakes itself. What you tend to find are fish that will appear just off or have outward signs of hemorrhaging. So there's going to be some internal bleeding as well as some dermal hemorrhaging, like you see on that shad in the bottom right there. This virus is highly contagious. There's a reason there still is, and after this virus was first identified in the Great Lakes, there was like an immediate ban on transporting fish across borders in states. It was hard to source fish from outside of states for stocking purposes. Even fish that were captured from the Great Lakes on the Ontario side that broodstock or eggs that would have been delivered to the States for their restoration and stocking purposes. Those fish were prevented from going across the border and eggs were prevented from going across the border in order to slow the spread of VHS. So it's been around for a while. It does seem to affect muskies more so than a lot of other species. Although that said, it is found in a ton of freshwater fish species, but muskies appear to be a pretty strong reservoir. There also seems to be some evidence that the virus will actually affect larger and older fish, which came out of some research on the St. Lawrence by Dr. Castleman. VHS transmission, it occurs naturally in the water, potentially through contact, similar to lymphosarcoma, particularly during the spawning season. Flare-ups can occur in the spring, so this is a stressful time period for the fish. They've just gone through the spawning process. They've had to allocate a lot of energy to reproduction. The amount of energy that they're able to allocate to keeping up their immune system may not be as strong as it would be at other times of the year. So they're susceptible. Oh my God, susceptible. There we go. I'll blame that on sleep.
4 hours sleep
and the baby. Yeah. They're susceptible to disease and things like that at this time of year. So VHS does not appear to be dangerous to humans, just as a kind of an FYI. But yeah, if you're in a waterway that has VHS in it, there's known reservoirs of VHS within a particular body of water you may have been fishing. Do your best to let your boat at least thoroughly dry in the sun for a while, or clean it off before going into another body of water. Okay. Thermal tolerance. This is where we're going to get into a bit of thermal refuge talk here. So what can we say about thermal tolerance? Well, freshwater fishes are often grouped into what are called temperature guilds or temperature groups. So you've got your cold water fish species like trout, lake trout, for example, and cisco, cool water species like muskies and pike, and then your warm water species like your largemouth bass and some of your sunfish species. The tolerance of warm water varies among these species. And for muskies, their optimal temperatures and the temperature range is in and around the mid-high 70s. So muskies can tolerate warm water better than other species for sure. Again, it's going to be very species specific, but there's still a point where they may not feel comfortable if the water gets too warm. And so this is where we enter into this whole discussion about thermal refuge. A thermal refuge is really kind of any area of a water body that provides shelter. Often in this context, we're talking about cool water, and it also needs to have ample oxygen. But this refuge this provides refuge from warm water temperatures. The same can occur during the winter, where fish may seek out areas of warmer water to escape really cold water. We're talking about thermal refuge. You might recall I actually touched on this a little bit during my discussion about climate change with the example of ciscos, which are a cold water species. As we get into a future where temperatures will warm, and we're already seeing warming water temperatures, what happens is you constrict the amount of thermal refuge habitat within a body of water. As that water warms and more of the water column is warm, species that need to seek refuge from that warm water will find less and less of a body of water that's within their kind of preferred temperature range. But in the context of muskies, do muskies use thermal refugia? And the answer to this is likely yes, though it's maybe not as pronounced as it would be for other species. And that's just a function of muskies being able to tolerate warmer water more so than other species. There also appears to not be any real direct evidence of this, where people have gone out and tracked fish into known areas of like thermal, a thermal refuge of some sort. Or if they're tracking them around, they may not necessarily have like a temperature sensor on the tag. So they might, not really know exactly where within a water column the fish might be. So it's more of circumstantial evidence. We think they're in these locations at these times of years, this time of the year, in order to seek out thermal refuge habitats. A lot of that kind of talk within the literature. But a thermal refuge could look like deep water. So as we kind of saw back in this diagram here, so you've got this thermal refuge. So if this is the summer, we've got a lot of warm water in the kind of upper layers of a water body. And then we've got this cooler zone toward the bottom. And then in this deeper water. And so that could act as a thermal refuge. You might also have colder tributaries coming into a river. And this is an example from Anchor River in Alaska. This would be for salmon, but you can see like these little tributaries here feeding into the main river. The purple there is cold water, and the rest of the main river stem is that, bright red there, so much warmer water. These might also be zones of groundwater upwelling. So anyone that's fishing rivers might be aware of some areas where there's springs coming up from the river bottom. And so that would often bring much cooler water, especially during the summer, and would serve as some thermal refuge. So that's all. I could probably ramble on for a while longer, but I definitely want to say that I had a ton of fun this, I don't know, when did we start this, John? January, February?
January, yeah.
Yeah.
Long time ago.
It feels like it's ages ago, yeah. But I had a lot of fun, a lot of fun fielding emails from people and coming on the show. And I hope over the last 20 episodes, folks have learned something. So,
gosh, it's been a pleasure having you here week after week. I know you've taught the audience a lot. You've taught me an incredible amount, and you're such a great representative of the new age science community, because you're addicted to muskies and being out on the water and the fishing side of it, and then the in-class, the deep research, meticulous study side of it. All of that is in you. You humanize it. You make it understandable for all of us, and the feedback just says everything. So thank you very, very much for being here all of this time. I gotta leave you with 2 or 3 comments just on your presentation tonight, because we always go back and forth a little bit. 40-inch muskie with a 13-inch big fat bullhead in its mouth at a time of year when a lot of people are downsizing baits.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I almost thought about mentioning something in that regard, because Camden, actually, there's a small group of us that have met on the side back in like February, March, where we have like a Zoom presentation thing, and then just a discussion. And Camden came on to one of these special little things, and a bunch of us got to talking about like bait size in the spring. Personally, I'm not a big believer in downsizing to like, a 4-inch bait or a 6-inch bait.
No.
I'm not a real big believer in that. And to me, this is just like, proof in the pudding here that, if there's big enough prey out there, they're going to go for that. I don't really know where the whole, you got to downsize in the spring thing came from. So, not sure. Maybe it's people that are thinking, well, there's going to be a lot of, 1-year-old fish that might be available to muskies up in the shallows or something like that. But, I maybe. Certainly not YOY, since most things around our region will be spawning in the spring. And so the YOY would be available more so in the fall. So yeah, there might be some 1-year-old prey fish like perch or bluegill or whatever. But a muskie's going to have to eat a lot of those and expend a lot of energy eating all those little prey species up. Whereas they could just, gulp down a 10-inch perch, sucker 13-inch bullhead, and get quite the meal out of that in one fell swoop. So,
absolutely. The VHS. It's funny how VHS keeps coming up. Doug Wegner brought it up last week. They missed 2 years of being able to put small muskies into Wisconsin, and that happened to Dr. Farrell with Syracuse University, and an entire crop of muskies destined 7-8-inch muskies that were destined for the St. Lawrence as well. So, really pertinent disease that just keeps coming back in the muskie world year after year. Neat stuff. That small lure thing that started by Americans. Most of my Americans all downsize in the spring. They're fishing for American-sized muskies. We're fishing for Canadian-sized muskies. So downsizing.
Shots fired.
not that big a deal up here. And Gord Pizer said his whole life that he doesn't believe in downsizing in the spring. And then last year he said, yeah, he gets it. He starts to downsize. So I'm conflicted. I don't know.
Me too. Because I will also downsize a little bit, but I'm doing it less and less and less. So
yeah, I agree. So thank you so much for all of this, Sean. A pleasure. You get a good night's sleep, and we'll talk to you again soon, my friend.
All right. Sounds good, John.
Take care. Wow, what a pleasure hanging out with Sean.